Who's the better mother? Violet Bridgerton or Portia Featherington? Stick around to the end of this video to find out what conclusion I come to. Brian Little. Hello MVPs, welcome back. If this is your first time here, welcome to my channel. I am Louise. I have been loving this season of Bridgerton, and I was pondering the question of who the better mother is. And at first, the answer was resounding to me, but then I sat down and really thought about it for a moment. And I feel like the question and even the conversation of motherhood and also these two characters is so layered. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about these two mothers, these two matriarchs of their families, these two essentially widows who are, looking after their brood, so to speak, without husbands in this Regency era. And I really want to break down the realities for each of these women. And then at the end of this video, I'll give you my opinion on who the better mother is. Let's get into it. First, we have to look at circumstances. Though very similar, these two women are widows. They are left to, fend after their children and just make sure that their livelihoods and their futures are secure in some respect. This is not an easy thing to do in the Regency era of London, especially when women don't even have a fraction of the rights that we have today in 2024. In looking at Portia, also a widow, she did not have, a love match. Lord Featherington was a drunk. He gambled. His demise was not pretty. And I don't even think they liked each other, let alone loved each other. So there's really polar differences between their marriages. And it really does take a village to raise children. At minimum, I believe, 2 people. Like, you need someone who is going to be a disciplinarian, and you need someone who is going to, be a bit more tender and sort of like speak life into their children. And I think, one upside to Violet's side of mothering is that she had support from her eldest son in parenting his siblings. They look at him as a father figure, and he definitely is the standard or the go-to person. Even when you look at season 1, when Daphne was, making her debut, there was a respect she had for him that she would show towards a father. I cannot recall, and mind you, I do want to make a disclaimer. I've only recently started reading one Bridgerton book, and that is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. But I don't recall, even at balls or even at the Featherington sisters' debut, their father being present. Like, I don't recall him, looking for husbands for them or approving on husbands for them. Most of the time we saw him at the house, or he was at boxing matches, or just like doing God knows what. And I don't see that Portia had that sort of male support when it came to her being able to rest in her feminine energy and be a mother. Like, think about that for a second. And when we talk about circumstances, I want to go into upbringing. Now, when we talk about these two mothers' parents, we've really only seen Violet's parents. And obviously that was during Queen Charlotte. And her father was, from what we saw, a beautiful, kind-hearted man who just really loved and doted on his daughter, spoke life into her, and loved her to be intelligent, loved her to be curious and creative. And it makes sense that she is the same way with her children. Her mother was a whole other thing on the other hand. It is almost like Violet's father had to be the tenderness and maybe also the disciplinarian. The mother maybe was a disciplinarian, but I feel like it may have been overshadowed by her cruelty and her closed-mindedness. So I can see her upbringing, Violet's upbringing, sort of leading into how she raised the Bridgerton children, especially the younger ones, after, her husband had passed. While we do not have insight into Portia's upbringing, you can almost guess. I'm pretty sure her parents were all about, how they were portrayed, all about security, all about just doing what was best to survive. Like, Portia Featherington is in flight or fight mode. And you really can't blame her, because even up and through this season, the Featherington household has been hanging in the balance, hanging on by a thread. While Violet, and the entire Bridgerton household, they're doing all right for themselves. They have the luxury of just really worrying about things that may not matter to the Featherington family, such as love. Portia's like, she says that one line to Penelope where she says,
"Do you know what is romantic? Security."
And I'm not gonna lie to you, when homegirl said that, it hit me in the face like a cherry pie. Security is romantic. Like, even in today, 2024, when the cost of things is through the roof, and minimum wage is what it is, and people are constantly striving every day to build and develop their finances, the one thing that matters is a roof over your head, food to eat, clean clothes, money to get to and from work. Like, everything else is a luxury. And to someone who is, let's be clear, the Featheringtons are not necessarily hurting for money, but it seems to me that they are in a circumstance that is very dire to them, to where they could lose their entire way of life. And that would be different for people. They probably could stand to downsize and be humbled a little bit. But I can understand someone not wanting to, lose their way of life. You lose what they've become accustomed to, and wanting to make sure that their daughters are taken care of because their husband didn't do it. So, life experiences really will shape who you are as a person. If you grew up knowing what it was like to not have food in the fridge, or, to go months on end without light or heat, you might, push your kids a little differently when it comes to who they marry, or tell them, in this era of time, that they need to marry, because the alternative is not someplace that they want to be. So, going back to Violet, they don't have to deal with this sort of fight or flight mode. It's like, you're going to be good. We are, at the height of the ton, and we're only going to attract the best of the best. So you're going to be good, and I think, there's a scene early in season 1, super early, season 1, episode 1, of, the Featherington sisters and Daphne going out to be debuted. They were all debuted in the same year. I didn't realize this till I went back and rewatched season 1, episode 1, as I was researching for this video. Portia is already very clear about who has the upper hand this year of debuts. Violet smiles at her and she gives her this sort of I can't even describe the look, but it wasn't a good one. It's like game on kind of a look. She knew that this was going to be the fight of the season. And so you see the duality between, these two mothers. And I can't necessarily say, depending on the circumstances, that Portia is wrong for wanting to make sure that her daughters are safe and cared for and sort of solidified, in their futures. That does not sound like a bad mother to me. But we're going to keep going. If you remember the show Wife Swap, really ask yourself this question. If these mothers swapped households, what would happen? Imagine, Portia Featherington swapping with Violet Bridgerton, and, the two of them raise their kids. You might say Portia would probably ease up a little bit. Her shoulders would slouch a little bit. She would stand up straight. She wouldn't be as, worried about what people thought about her. She wouldn't be pressuring, all of these kids to do whatever, if she had, Edmund for a husband, she may have handled, the debut differently. And so I say that to say the circumstances really will shape what kind of mother a person is. And when I think about Violet Bridgerton becoming, even if it is for, a day or for a short period of time, or maybe if that's how the chips fell, if she was a Violet Featherington, man, who knows? Kind-hearted or not? Well, number one, I don't think her dad would have allowed her to marry Lord Featherington, but let's just say that happened, right? Could she deal? Would she know what to do? Would she have, the gumption and the savvy and the wit to perform in the way that Portia does to make sure that at no expenses spared, my kids are going to be good. I don't care how conniving I have to be. I don't care who I have to scam. I don't care who I have to get in bed with. Like, my family is going to be good. Would that be her take on things? So I really got to thinking about that. And I was like, who's the better mother? What is interesting is that I believe to any child, their mother can be seen as overbearing. That is a word that I was constantly seeing used to describe Portia Featherington. But in starting to read, romancing Mr. Bridgerton, Colin has felt that his mother too was overbearing. So I do believe that there are times where Violet has also been crafty and cunning with support of Lady Danbury, of sort of bending, or as she would say, molding the Ton to their will. And how is that so different from Portia? Portia doesn't have a friend. She doesn't have a buddy. She doesn't have an in with, the queen. So her tactics are seen as being a bit more abrasive because she has no other choice. But her desires for her daughters are no different from Violet's. Now, here is a point that I would love to make. As someone who has been raised in my village that raised me by a Portia Featherington type and a Violet Bridgerton type, this is one thing that these two mothers are incredibly they just missed the mark. Discussing the Marital Act. There are ways to prepare your daughter for something that could be traumatic for her or could be just all shocking for her altogether without being crude or without feeling like, she doesn't know. I don't want her to know this because I don't want her to try to engage in these things before she's married. Number one, I totally get that because there are certain things that could happen, especially back in Regency London, that would ruin her. Look at what happened with Marina. So we want to have the discussion at least on her wedding night. Like, if we go back to season 1, the evening after Daphne got married, she really was trying to get that out of Violet. And she just couldn't tell her. It was such a cringe conversation or topic for her. And a part of me was like, lady, you got 8 kids. What is there not to tell? And poor Daphne had to go to her, her maid to get the unrated version. And it was just like, same thing with Portia. I mean, we saw in season 3.
Inserts himself? Inserts himself where?
And when that line is going to forever be iconic and just will always take us back to the season of Bridgerton. Mothers not speaking to their daughters about the birds and the bees is just weird. We see it happen time and time again with the men, with the brothels, with just conversations, free conversation. I mean, I think season 1, they were talking about taking out their sticks and all these. And I'm like, okay, y'all can have casual laughing conversation. Anthony was clearly having the conversations with, his younger brothers. Good on y'all. Great. You have expectations, you know what to expect, but keeping your daughters in the dark on their wedding day is such a huge miss. I'm not a mother yet, but I can imagine, regardless of, the gender of my child, but especially if I have a daughter, I want her to be prepared to know everything that is going to happen to her body. And that might be the girl's girl in me. That might be the feminist in me. I'm going to try to keep this as PG as possible. The idea of someone entering your body can be at times traumatizing. And that is okay for you to be taken back by it. But you can imagine that your trust now being in oftentimes a stranger to show you what's being done day of. Ciao. Like, thankfully we had, our sex ed classes in high school, in recent times. But come on, like, huge misses for these two women. And I get at the time, it just wasn't something that you did. But I can imagine Lady Danbury, if she had daughters, like, she was like, listen here, I got to tell you something. Especially with everything she went through with Lord Danbury. Like, so that is another thing that I wanted to kind of show the similarities of, like, their mothering, and just show, like, how they're not that different. Like, their approaches are very different. Portia's a lot more abrasive and direct, so to speak. If she were a man, we probably wouldn't see a problem with it. Sorry to make it about that, but y'all know it is what it is. With Violet, she's definitely more demure, as maybe some would say classy, and, a woman who probably would wear Chanel, to bed. But have these conversations. And also, like, she's a lot more kind-hearted with her daughters. Perfect example. I want to touch on the fact that I believe Eloise and Penelope are close in age, right? Neither of them are currently married. And I'm talking about from the show's perspective. I have not read the books entirely yet, so I cannot speak from that perspective. But from the show's perspective, neither of them are married yet, and maybe considered spinsters. But you don't hear Violet say that to her daughter. She says things to her like, I know you're not ready. I don't want to push you. I don't want to force you. And then we hear things from Portia like, I'm so happy you'll be here to take care of me, Or we hear things like, it's too bad your sisters couldn't come so that you would have someone to hide behind. Like, there's the difference of speaking life into your children when it comes to them maybe not progressing as they are expected to by society, or them not meeting your expectations for them. And so that is a huge indication to me of Violet being a better mother when it comes to how she speaks to her children. I think Violet has instilled in them the expectations she has for them, but she doesn't hold it over their heads. She doesn't villainize them for not meeting them yet. She doesn't encourage them to shrink themselves, or to, hide behind their siblings. Like, I find that to be not just the characteristic of a good mother, but a good parent in general. Like, you may want to do something different, but, that could be what sets you apart for sure, and what, finds you great success. Colin isn't somebody who, can be the Viscount because that's Antony's thing. He wants to be, he's still trying to figure out, and as I'm reading the book, he's still trying to figure out what he wants to do. Benedict is an artist. He's a painter. I love that there is a desire for this young man to find purpose. And even when, in this season, they're having a conversation, they're sitting down, and the three oldest, brothers are having a drink, and Antony's back from his honeymoon, and Benedict talks about, enjoying being, a stand-in Viscount while he was away because he felt like he had purpose. Like, you don't hear those conversations over at the Featherington house. Purpose is not something, that they're taught to look for. Penelope just is looking for it because that is, she is a free spirit in a sense, and she's reading and she's learning about other countries and religions and things. And she realizes that the world is bigger than the Ton. The world is bigger than her family. The world is bigger than her. And I think she gets that from spending time with the Bridgertons. So yet again, I reiterate, that is what makes Violet a good mother, because everything that she's poured into her kids has spilled over into Penelope Featherington, and has really given her a light in a space where things just really seem very dark, and she is someone who is consistently overlooked. Another thing that I want to touch on when it comes to what I perceive to be a good mother is letting your child know that they have a choice. This doesn't mean, this is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they can do whatever they want, but it's a perfect example of like, this is what I want for you. This is what, would look great on paper, but you can also choose what you believe is best for you, and I'll guide you along the way. We saw this happen in season 1 with Daphne and the prince. The queen, everyone was so excited for her to be matched with this prince, but she falls in love with Simon. Simon's not a bad choice. He's a duke, he's well off, he's handsome, he's got so much going for him. He's a little flawed, but who isn't? But, one thing, a line that, and I'm gonna, paraphrase here, but a line that Violet says to Francesca this season, remember, like Daphne, like you don't have to choose what we pick for you. We don't have to choose what the queen picks for you. It is your choice. Now, when you look at Portia Featherington and her kids, she chose those 2 young boys for her daughters. And I see why. I want to go into that for a little bit. The idea of arranged marriages is one that I've always been on the fence about. Neither against it or for it. I think much like this entire conversation, it's circumstantial. And I understand why Portia chose the men that she chose. These boys adore these girls. Adore these girls. Who knows what would have happened if she let them choose whoever they wanted? Who knows? One thing that I think guides Portia in the choices she makes for her daughters, particularly the older ones, because we all know that she really don't give 2 birds about Penelope, which we'll get to in a second. She knows how her husband was and didn't want that for them. So choosing these boys that adore her daughters is definitely a mother's love. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from aunties, from people who have been mother figures to me in the past, marry a man who loves you more. And as a married woman, I can tell you that tea is true. It is so true. And that is what Portia did for her daughters. She chose men that are borderline infatuated with them, and she knows they'll be taken care of. Now, also, these girls kind of run all over these guys, which I think was another choice that she made, so that she could run them. But that wasn't so much of a good mother vibe. But I love that she chose guys that were not going to belittle them and will give them, the freedom to be who they are within reason. Now, let's talk about the way that Portia speaks to Penelope. A lot of their interactions this season were very triggering for me. I'll be honest with you. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I was raised by a woman in my village that definitely was borderline speaking to me the way that Portia speaks to Penelope. And I'm telling you, when she said to her, "It's good to know that you'll be around to take care of me when I'm old," I almost simultaneously sighed the way that Penelope did in that scene. You just have no belief in me. So how am I supposed to believe in myself? She says things to her like, you can hide behind someone. You're foolish to think that you could achieve so much, when she was, trying to get, when it came out that she was enlisting Colin to help her find a husband. Like, I just was so triggered in a sense of like, if she wasn't feeling low already, you just knocked her to the lowest. Like lower than a snake in a wagon wheel trail. And I literally wanted to cry internally because I felt like she was speaking to me, because I'd felt those, not those words, but like the tone and the meaning behind it and the context. That is not a good mother. That is not a good mother. That is someone who just really doesn't realize that they're in charge of your development as a human being. It was Portia Featherington's responsibility to make sure that Penelope was as confident as she could be, regardless of her complexion, regardless of her weight. It was her responsibility to make her a lady. And not so much a lady in the sense of what society thinks, but like a lady who is confident about what she brings to the table. Triggered. Now, when we look at the differences here, Violet is more of a nurturing and ethical mother. That is how she approaches family and, social status. Portia is more cunning, more strategic. She is literally manning the ship on her own and is often in, survival mode. She just needs to get her family secure, and then she can return to gloating, bragging, and boasting about her daughters, her successes, and whatever else, she finds, time to do when it comes to her interests. Now the question comes, who's the better mother? I hate to disappoint you, but they're both good mothers. They both have their cons and they both have their pros. But I have to say, there is something about Portia's tenacity, something about her willingness to do almost anything for her babies. Aside from Penelope, she always gets left out. And I understand in the books, there's a younger sister named Felicity. I just learned that. Not sure why they left her out of the series, but okay. But yeah, even for Felicity, she was constantly looking for, ways to make sure that they were good. It kind of feels at times like she was intentionally keeping Penelope back because she was in fear of being alone, or she didn't believe Penelope could, find a match because she was very opinionated and she was reading books and felt like these things were not attractive to men. Whatever it may have been, I still think that Portia is a good mother. She's really done the best that she could within this era of time to ensure that her daughters' futures were good. And we already know, it goes without saying, that Violet Bridgerton is the bee's knees. Like, adopt me, please. Just the sweetest lady. Definitely someone who speaks life into her children. Even the way that she was speaking to Colin this season, on the stairs before he goes to the ball to get Penelope. Like, she says that line to him about, be careful that you don't leave the armor on for too long before it rusts and you can't take it off. Like, okay, mommy. And that young man sat there in his study and pondered everything that his mother said to him. And it really resonated with him. And I feel like there were no threats involved. There was nothing, with him, her calling him names or, anything else that could have come across. Like, she didn't need to speak down to him, but she was real with him. Violet Bridgerton is a great mother. I'm a little biased, but I still stand by my decision that they are both good mothers in their own way, and that their circumstances and life experiences have shaped the way that they mother. There's no one clean-cut way to be a mom, but I do think that these two women are doing the best that they can with what they have. If you've made it this far, you are the real MVP. So what did we think of this video? It's something that really sparked a flame in my heart. And I've been wanting to do this video since before I dropped the reaction to season 3, episodes 3 and 4. And I'm finally sitting down to do it. It is Wednesday, June 12th, 7:30 p.m. And we are mere hours away from the second half of Bridgerton premiering. And I am really excited to see how the rest of the season plays out. I also want to say hello to all of my new subscribers. In the past 2 weeks, there are 1,000 of you, 1,000 new subscribers. And I'm not going to cry, but it is still my dream to be a full-time content creator, a YouTuber. And you guys are helping me to realize that not only are you subscribing, but we're having the most engaging conversations in the comment section. I am hearing from new subscribers that not only do they love the channel, but they love the comment section. Like, y'all are so beautiful, beautiful people. We share a love for this series. We share a love for romance, and we share a love for pollen. And I just cannot thank you all enough for pouring into me and keeping me motivated, keeping me connected. I do want to ask, I'm going to be putting up a poll at some point, but I'll also ask here in this video, should I create a Patreon? I did react to Queen Charlotte. This was last year, and I still have that footage, so I could upload that unedited to begin with, but I have a ton of ideas for additional content. If you'd like me to create a Patreon, please comment Patreon below, and it'll help me to figure out if this is something that you all want. And then at some point throughout the rest of this month, I'll be sure to put the poll on the community page. Thank you to everyone who's been on the community tab, just really, taking those quizzes, interacting with the polls, commenting. I truly love communicating with you guys there as well. If you have not already, please make sure that you subscribe and click the notification bell so that you never miss a video from me. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.